In the suffocating heat of the Mekong Delta, Captain Jack Harlan was leading his Special Forces team through the jungle when the silence became too perfect. A routine recon mission turned deadly when the Viet Cong sprung a meticulously planned ambush, sealing every possible escape. Jack Harlan wasn't just another American soldier caught behind enemy lines. For 20 years he had fought in the shadows, an elite operator trained in unconventional warfare, known for turning hopeless battles into victories through sheer tactical brilliance. When the VC closed in, thinking they had him pinned, they didn't realize they were forcing a desperate man to make a brutal calculation. Harlan reached for his radio, fingers bloody, breath steady. If they wanted him dead, they'd have to survive what he was about to unleash, an airstrike on his own position. What began as a deadly trap would become a massacre. The jungle would burn, and the legend of what happened that night would haunt the Mekong forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The monsoon season had turned the Mekong Delta into a steam bath, but Captain Jack Harlan knew the suffocating humidity wasn't what made his skin crawl. 20 years of combat instincts screamed danger as he led his 5-man Special Forces team through the verdant hell. Something was wrong. The jungle was too quiet, the air too still. "Radio check," Harlan whispered, his weathered face betraying nothing of the unease churning in his gut. Behind him, Corporal Luis "Loco" Ramirez adjusted the heavy comm unit strapped to his back. "All clear, Cap. 3rd Battalion reports no movement in our AO." Loco's usually jovial voice carried an edge. Even the wisecracker felt it. Sergeant Ray Deacon Holloway's lips moved in silent prayer as he scanned the tree line, his M16 at the ready. The former preacher's son only quoted scripture during missions when his own faith needed reinforcing. That wasn't a good sign. "What's he saying?" "Private First Class Andy," Red Dwyer asked, his young face shining with sweat. The kid was barely 19, fresh out of basic training and eager to prove himself. He hadn't learned yet that in Vietnam, eagerness got you killed. "Psalm 23:4, Deacon muttered. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." "Man, save that fire and brimstone shit for Sunday service," Loco cut in, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Way you're talking, gonna make Red here piss his pants before we even make contact." Harlan raised his fist and the squad froze. There, partially hidden beneath a fallen bamboo stalk, a discarded ration tin, Chinese markings still visible through the mud. Recent. The metal hadn't started to rust in the dampness yet. They found the boot prints next, pressed deep into the soft earth. Multiple sets heading north. Regular army would have called it in, requested permission to pursue. But this wasn't a regular army mission. Intelligence had picked up chatter about a high-ranking VC officer operating in the area. Harlan's team was here to confirm and eliminate the threat. Quick, quiet, and off the books. "Track them?" Deacon asked, already knowing the answer. Harlan nodded. They moved forward in formation, weapons ready, every sense straining for the ambush they all felt coming. The body stopped them cold. American. Special Forces by his patch, throat opened ear to ear. The blood was still wet. "Jesus Christ," Red whispered, the color draining from his face. "He's still warm, Cap." Harlan's mind raced. This soldier had been dead less than an hour. His weapons and radio were missing, but his tags were left, a message. The VC wanted them to find this. "We need to move. Now." But even as Harlan gave the order, he knew it was too late. The first shot shattered the pre-dawn silence, followed immediately by the distinctive whoosh of an RPG. The jungle erupted in muzzle flashes, shadows within shadows materializing into VC fighters. They'd walked right into it. "Contact front, 3 o'clock, Harlan bellowed, shoving Red toward cover as the RPG detonated against a nearby tree. The radio on Loco's back exploded in a shower of sparks and shrapnel. Deacon's prayers turned to curses as he returned fire, his M16 chattering in controlled bursts. Loco scrambled for what remained of the radio, his usual swagger replaced by desperate focus. Red stood frozen, his rifle hanging useless at his side as bullets tore through the foliage around him. The look in his eyes was one Harlan had seen too many times before, the moment when training collided with reality, when the fantasy of war met its brutal truth. "Red, gun up, return fire." Harlan's command snapped the kid back. Red's first shot went wide, but his second found its mark. A shadow dropped from the trees, and something inside the young soldier changed forever. They were surrounded, the enemy positions carefully prepared. This was no chance encounter. Every path they might have taken would have led here. The VC had been waiting, watching, herding them like cattle to slaughter. As Harlan directed his men into defensive positions, a cold certainty settled over him. This wasn't just reconnaissance anymore. This was a trap. And somewhere in the jungle, hidden among the shadows and the blood mist and the gunfire, waited the man they'd been sent to find. The real question was, had they found him, or had he found them? Bullets stitched the earth around Harlan as he dove behind a massive banyan tree, its twisted roots offering temporary shelter from the storm of lead. The pre-dawn darkness strobed with muzzle flashes, transforming familiar jungle shapes into grotesque shadows that danced and died in the gunfire. "Left flank's collapsing," Harlan shouted over the cacophony of battle. Through the chaos, he caught glimpses of movement, VC fighters materializing from spider holes and vanishing back into the undergrowth. They'd prepared this killing ground. "Well, I see him," Deacon's voice carried across the firefight, steady despite the blood streaming from a fresh graze on his cheek. He was dragging one of their point men, Private Martinez, whose leg was a mangled mess from the initial RPG blast. Loco worked frantically over the remains of their radio, cursing in Spanish as he tried to salvage something, anything, from the shattered equipment. "Come on, you piece of shit," he muttered, fingers dancing over frayed wires. Static crackled mockingly in response. Red crouched nearby, his young face a mask of terror and determination as he emptied magazine after magazine into the tree line. His shots were wild, panicked, but at least he was shooting. That was something. "Conserve ammo," Harlan ordered, his mind racing through scenarios, calculating odds, searching for a way out. The VC had them surrounded, but their left flank was pressing harder. They wanted to funnel Harlan's team in a specific direction. Into what? Another ambush? A minefield? Only one way to find out. "Deacon, get Martinez to cover." Harlan chambered a fresh round. "Loco, Red, on me. We're gonna punch through their left side." "You crazy, Cap?" Loco's eyes went wide, but his hands were already reloading, muscle memory taking over. "Better than dying here." Harlan's voice carried a certainty he didn't feel. 3-round bursts, 10-meter spread, move. They erupted from cover in perfect sync, a maneuver practiced countless times until it became instinct. Harlan led the charge, his M16 blazing. 2 VC fighters fell immediately, caught off guard by the aggressive push. A third raised his AK-47, but Red was faster. The kid's shot caught the enemy soldier center mass. Time seemed to slow as Red watched the man fall, watched the light fade from his eyes. In that moment, something inside Red changed, a fundamental shift that could never be undone. "Keep moving!" Harlan's command snapped Red back to reality. They pressed forward, gaining ground inch by bloody inch. Behind them, Deacon provided covering fire while keeping pressure on Martinez's wound. For a moment it seemed to work. The VC's formation buckled under their assault, creating a small gap in their lines. Hope flickered. Maybe they could break contact, find better ground to... A new sound cut through the gunfire. A sharp, distinctive whistle. Harlan's blood ran cold. He knew that sound. Signal whistle. Which meant, "Second wave," he screamed. "Fall back. Fall back." Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Fresh muzzle flashes erupted from the jungle ahead. The VC hadn't been herding them toward another ambush. They'd been driving them straight into their main force. As Harlan dove for cover, he caught a glimpse of movement in the trees. A figure standing calmly amidst the chaos, observing the battle with cold calculation. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and Harlan knew. Colonel Bao Van Thieu. The man they'd been sent to find. He wasn't hiding. He was hunting. The jungle erupted with renewed fury as the second wave of VC fighters joined the assault. There would be no breaking contact now, no escape, only survival. "Tripwire!" Harlan hissed, grabbing Red's shoulder before the kid's boot could snag the nearly invisible strand. Even in retreat, even with death breathing down their necks, they couldn't afford to rush. The jungle was rigged to kill the careless. They'd been falling back for 20 minutes, trading space for time, but the VC weren't making it easy. Every route seemed to lead to another ambush, every path seeded with deadly surprises. Punji stakes gleamed wickedly in the growing dawn light. Primitive. Markers on trees warned of mines. Warnings meant for VC fighters now serving as deadly intelligence for Harlan's team. "How's that radio coming, Loco?" Harlan's voice was barely a whisper. They couldn't risk giving away their position, not with Thieu's forces still probing the jungle around them. Loco's fingers worked desperately at the mangled equipment, his usual wisecracks replaced by muttered curses. "Half the circuits are fried, Cap. I might be able to—" His words cut off as gunfire erupted behind them. "Contact rear." Deacon spun to return fire, but the sudden movement left him exposed. The crack of an AK-47 was followed by a wet thud as a round caught him in the shoulder, spinning him against a tree. Man down. Red moved to help, but Harlan grabbed him. "Cover fire first." They couldn't help Deacon if they were all dead. Harlan and Red laid down suppressing fire while Loco dragged Deacon to safety, the radio bouncing uselessly on his back. "I'm good." Deacon gritted through clenched teeth, but the spreading crimson stain on his shirt told a different story. "Just a scratch." "Like hell it is." Harlan quickly examined the wound. Through and through, no major arteries, but bad enough. They needed to find cover, and soon. As if in answer to his thoughts, Martinez pointed weakly ahead. "Cap'n structure." Through the dense foliage, Harlan spotted it, the unmistakable outlines of a building. An old outpost, probably abandoned. Or another trap. They had no choice. "Move. Slow and careful." Harlan took point, every sense straining for danger as they approached. The outpost was small, crude, little more than an elevated hut with firing positions, but it was defendable. More importantly, it would give them a chance to treat Deacon and attempt repairs on the radio. Inside, the musty air carried the lingering scent of cigarette smoke and gun oil. The VC had used this place but recently abandoned it. Why? "Loco, see what you can do with that radio. Red, first aid kit for Deacon, I'll take first watch." Harlan's orders were automatic, but his mind was racing. Thieu wasn't just pursuing them. He was hurting them. Every step they'd taken since the ambush had been calculated, predicted. "Cap." Loco's voice carried an edge of desperation. "Radios. Dead. Like really dead. Whatever hit it in that first blast, and we're not calling for help. Not with this." Deacon grunted as Red cleaned his wound. "So we're on our own." "We were always on our own." Harlan's words hung in the humid air. This was a black op from the start. No backup, no support. A sound caught his attention. Distant but distinct. Movement in the undergrowth. Professional. Deliberate. "They're coming." Red's voice shook slightly. "Aren't they?" Harlan nodded, checking his ammunition. 3 magazines left. Not enough. Never enough. "What's the play, Cap?" Loco asked, his hand resting on his pistol grip. "We running or fighting?" Before Harlan could answer, something clattered against the outpost wall. A small metal cylinder rolled across the wooden floor, trailing smoke. Not a grenade. A message canister. Inside was a single piece of paper. On it, in perfect English, "You have 1 hour to surrender. After that, we stop being merciful." It was signed, Colonel Thieu. The jungle seemed to press closer, darker, hungrier. They weren't just being hunted, they were being played with. Thieu's. Message had given them an hour. They lasted 10 minutes in the outpost before the mortars started falling. The first rounds landed short, but Harlan knew better than to wait for the VC to dial in their range. They fled into the jungle just as the building erupted into splinters behind them. But leaving the outpost meant moving blind, meant playing Thieu's game again. Martinez went down first. The tripwire was almost invisible, a hair-thin strand of wire that caught his good leg as they crossed a shallow stream. The click was barely audible over the running water. The explosion wasn't. "Get down." Harlan's warning came too late. The Claymore mine shredded the morning air with 1,000 steel balls, and Martinez disappeared in a red mist. One moment he was there, the next, Red vomited into the stream, his whole body shaking. "Oh God, oh Jesus, oh God!" "Quiet!" Harlan grabbed him, but the kid was coming apart, hyperventilating, ready to scream. Harlan slapped him hard across the face. Look at me, you fall apart now, we all die, understand?" Terror warred with training in Red's eyes, but slowly, painfully, training won. He nodded, swallowing hard. "They'll have heard that," Deacon said through gritted teeth, his wounded shoulder leaving him pale and sweating. "They'll be coming. Let them come." The words surprised even Harlan as they left his mouth. But as he said them, a plan began forming. "We've been running, like rats in a maze, dancing to Thieu's tune. Time to change the music." Caps lost it. Loco muttered. But there was hope in his voice. Anything was better than waiting to die. "You want to make a stand?" Deacon's voice was skeptical. "With what? We're down to half ammo, no radio, no..." "Not a stand." Harlan was already moving, his mind racing ahead. "An ambush. They think they're hunting us? Let's show them what it feels like to be hunted." "That's suicide," Loco argued. "They know. These woods better than..." "They know them too well," Harlan cut him off. "They're comfortable here, confident. That makes them predictable." He gestured to the surrounding jungle. "Look at their patterns. They're pushing us north, using these natural channels in the terrain. They'll expect us to keep running that way." Understanding dawned in Deacon's eyes. "So we double back. Circle around behind their advance elements," Harlan confirmed. "Hit them where they feel safest." "With what?" Red asked, but his shaking had stopped. The prospect of action, of striking back, was steadying him. Harlan smiled grimly. "They've been leaving us presents all morning. Time we returned the favor." He pointed to the shattered remains of the claymore that had killed Martinez. "We're going to repurpose some of their hardware." The next 30 minutes were a blur of careful backtracking, setting up their position. Every booby trap they found became a resource. Every tripwire was reset with new triggers. The jungle that had been trying to kill them was becoming their weapon. They found their spot in a natural depression, where the terrain would funnel their pursuers into a killing zone. Harlan positioned his men carefully, using every lesson he'd learned about VC tactics against them. "Remember," he whispered as they heard the first sounds of approaching fighters, "they're not hunting us anymore. We're hunting them." Red's hands were steady now on his rifle. Deacon's pain seemed forgotten as he sighted down his barrel. Loco had that wild grin back, the one that had earned him his nickname. The first VC scout appeared through the foliage, confident, expecting to find frightened prey. He never saw the tripwire. The jungle exploded. The first explosion sent bodies flying exactly as Harlan had planned. The VC patrol's point man triggered the claymore, and in that fraction of a second before his death, his eyes met Harlan's, through the foliage. There was no fear there, only surprise that the prey had become the predator. "Now!" Harlan's command unleashed hell. Their ambush was perfect. The natural gully became a killing zone as Harlan's team opened fire from 3 different positions. The VC fighters, bunched too close together, died in clusters. Their own booby traps, rewired and repositioned, cut down their escape routes. Red's shooting was different now. No more spray and pray. Each shot was deliberate, mechanical. His face showed nothing as his targets dropped. The boy who had retched at Martinez's death was gone, replaced by something harder. "Cease fire!" Harlan called as the last echoes died away. Loco! Deacon! Check! The bodies read Watch R6. They found a treasure trove, ammunition, grenades, rations, and most importantly, a working radio. Loco fell on it like a starving man on bread. Come on, baby, he muttered, fingers dancing over the dials. Talk to me. Static answered him, broken by occasional bursts of Vietnamese chatter. Still no clear channel to call for help. Deacon moved between the bodies, checking for survivors. He paused at one, a young VC no older than Red. The boy was still breathing, gutshot, dying slowly. Please, the fighter whispered in broken English. Please. Deacon raised his pistol, then hesitated. His hand shook. I got it. Harlan's voice was flat as he stepped forward. The single shot echoed through the trees. Deacon turned away, his lips moving in silent prayer. Cap, Loco called out. We got maybe 20 minutes before they missed their patrol. Less if anyone heard the firefight. Harlan nodded, already moving. His movements were pure instinct now, tactical thinking giving way to something more primal. He didn't plan anymore, he hunted. Strip everything useful, he ordered. Weapons, ammo, radio parts. Then we... The words died in his throat as he saw what Red was examining. A map taken from one of the bodies. It showed their entire area of operation, with carefully marked positions, including one location circled in red. That's their command post, Harlan breathed. That's where Tew is. Cap. Deacon's voice held a warning. We're supposed to be finding a way out, not... This is our way out. Harlan's eyes had a dangerous gleam. We take out Tew, we end this. No more running. No more games. That's not the mission anymore, Deacon argued. The mission is survival. The mission is whatever I say it is, Sergeant. Harlan's tone made everyone freeze. There was something new in his voice, something that made even Loco look up in concern. Red said nothing, but his finger never left. His trigger. The kid who had frozen at his first firefight now looked ready to kill at a word. They all felt it, the subtle shift. They weren't just fighting to escape anymore. Something darker was taking hold. The argument died as suddenly as it had begun. The jungle, which had been filled with the sounds of combat and desperate movement, went completely still. No birds. No insects, nothing. Nature itself was holding its breath. Movement, Red whispered. Multiple positions. Harlan felt it before he saw it. A change in the air, a predatory presence that made his combat-honed instincts scream. Whatever was coming, their brief moment as hunters was over. The real predator had arrived. Darkness fell like a shroud over the jungle. But it wasn't the night that terrified them. It was the waiting, the knowing. They had retreated to higher ground after the ambush, finding a defensive position among the twisted roots of an ancient banyan tree. But it wasn't a refuge. It was a cage. Another one, Red whispered, his voice cracking as flickering torchlight appeared through the trees below. They watched, helpless, as VC fighters dragged a captured American soldier into the clearing. Even, from this distance, they could see his Special Forces patch. Wilson. Deacon recognized him. Second group. They got hit 2 days ago, we thought. The shot echoed through the darkness. Wilson's body crumpled. Dear God. Deacon's prayer was a broken whisper. Dear God in heaven. Save your breath. Harlan's voice was cold. God's not in this jungle tonight. They had watched 3 executions already, each one a message, each one a countdown. Loco worked frantically at the captured radio, trying to boost its signal through the atmospheric interference. Just need 5 minutes, he muttered. 5 clean minutes to get a signal out. We don't have 5 minutes. Harlan's mind was racing through scenarios, each one darker than the last. Their ammunition was low. Deacon's wound was showing signs of infection. And the VC, they were just toying with them now. A sound cut through the night, familiar yet alien. American rock music distorted through speakers somewhere in the darkness. All along the watchtower, Jim Hendrix's guitar wailed through the trees, a surreal counterpoint to their nightmare. Psychological warfare, Harlan muttered. They're inside our heads now. Inside? Loco's laugh held an edge of hysteria. Cap, they're everywhere. We're surrounded, running out of ammo, no backup coming. There's no way out of this one. There's always a way out. But even as Harlan said it, his hand brushed against the emergency transmitter on his belt, the one meant for desperate situations, the one that could call in an airstrike, on their own position. The thought had been growing in his mind like a cancer. Better to die on their feet, taking Tew with them, than face what awaited them in the VC camps. Another execution. Another message. This time they could hear the prisoner's final words. God bless Amir. The gunshot silenced him. Deacon's faith finally broke. The man who had quoted scripture through firefights and mortar barrages slumped against a tree, his eyes empty. We're already dead, he whispered. This is hell. Red said nothing. He just watched the darkness with dead eyes, his finger never leaving his trigger. The boy was gone. Only the killer remained. Loco looked up from the radio, real fear in his eyes for the first time. Cap, what do we do? Harlan's hand closed around the emergency transmitter. The jungle pressed in around them, alive with hidden enemies. Somewhere out there, Tew was watching, waiting, enjoying their slow descent into despair. The music played on, mocking them. There must be some kind of way out of here. Harlan made his decision. There is a way out, he said quietly, but none of you are going to like it. The transmitter felt heavy in his hand, like the weight of all the lives it could end, including their own. The jungle was alive with whispers. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig carried the promise of death. Harlan methodically checked each possible escape route again, though he knew nothing had changed. Nothing would change. The VC had them surrounded in a noose of steel and shadows, slowly tightening the knot. Deacon's breathing had become labored, his skin hot to the touch. The wound in his shoulder had turned an ugly color, angry red lines, spreading outward. Fever's getting worse, he mumbled, his usual scripture replaced by delirious murmurs. Stay with me, Deacon. Harlan pressed a canteen to his friend's cracked lips. That's an order. Static crackled from the radio where Loco worked, his fingers bloody from trying to splice wires together in the darkness. For a moment, a voice broke through. American, distant, talking about supply routes. Then it was gone, swallowed by the white noise. Almost had it. Loco's voice cracked with desperation. Just need to boost the signal a little more. Maybe if I... Are we gonna die out here, Cap? Red's question hung in the humid air. The kid sat with his back against a tree, eyes wide and unfocused, his rifle clutched like a child's safety blanket. He looked younger than ever in the filtered moonlight. Before Harlan could answer, the radio squealed. A new voice cut through, the static, heavily accented but clear. Captain Harlan, are you comfortable? The voice was cultured, almost pleasant, like a host checking on dinner guests. Colonel Tew, I presume. Harlan kept his own voice steady despite the rage burning in his chest. Such a pleasure to finally speak. I've been studying you, Captain. Your tactics, your decisions, the way you protect your men. A pause. Or try to. A spotlight blazed, to life in the clearing below, momentarily blinding them. When Harlan's vision cleared, he saw what Tew wanted them to see. A figure hung suspended between two trees. An American soldier, still alive despite wounds that should have killed him hours ago. His Special Forces patch was clearly visible, along with the creative work of Tew's interrogators. Jesus Christ, Loco whispered, turning away. Your God cannot help you here. Tew's voice was almost gentle. But I can. Surrender now and your men will be treated fairly. Continue to resist. The spotlight illuminated fresh cuts appearing on the hanging soldier's body. His screams echoed through the darkness. Red vomited quietly into the underbrush. Even Deacon, delirious with Fever turned his face away. You're a professional, Captain. A pragmatist. You know how this ends. Tio's voice carried a smile. The only variable is how much pain we must endure before reaching the inevitable conclusion. Harlan's hand tightened on his rifle. If you're such a student of my tactics, you know I don't surrender. No, you calculate, you weigh options, so calculate this. I have 3 more of your Special Forces comrades. Their suffering will be legendary. Unless I give myself up. Harlan finished. By dawn, Tio confirmed, you have 3 hours to decide. After that, the spotlight shifted, illuminating another bound figure in the distance. Well, dawn brings such lovely colors to the jungle. The radio went silent. The spotlight clicked off. Darkness swallowed them again. Cap. Loco's voice was hesitant. What are we going to do? Harlan's fingers brushed the emergency transmitter again. His eyes found red, still shaking, stripped of illusions. Deacon, burning with fever, no prayers left. Loco, refusing to accept defeat even as it crushed them. The hanging soldiers' screams had stopped. The jungle's silence was worse. Tio was right about one thing. Harlan was a pragmatist, and there was only one calculation left to make. His hand closed around the transmitter. Cap? Red's voice shook. Cap, what are you thinking? I'm thinking, Harlan said quietly, that if we're going to die in this godforsaken jungle, we're taking that bastard with us. The transmitter's switch felt like ice under his thumb. Dawn was coming, and so was hell. The flare painted the pre-dawn sky in sickly green, casting twisted shadows through the canopy. A warning. Time running out. Harlan sat with his back against a massive tree root, the emergency transmitter heavy in his hands. In the darkness, Deacon's fever dreams spilled out in broken whispers. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord, in the house, the valley of death. Shut him up, Loco hissed, still working the radio. They'll hear. He stopped mid-sentence, eyes going wide. Wait, holy shit, I'm getting something. Static cleared for a moment. A voice emerged. Repeat. Any Special Forces units in grid. Sector Charlie Echo respond. Harlan's hand trembled slightly as he raised the handset. This was it. The moment of choosing. Firebase Echo, this is Ranger 6. His voice was steady despite the chaos in his mind. Authentication code Sierra November 47 Tango. A pause. Then, authentication confirmed, Ranger 6. Report. Status. Harlan closed his eyes. Opened them. Request immediate fire mission. Danger close. The words hung in the humid air like a death sentence. You can't be serious. Loco stared at him. Cap, that's suicide. They'll drop it right on top of us. Better than what Tew has planned. Harlan's voice was ice. You saw what they did to Wilson, to the others. Danger close, confirmed. The radio crackled. Be advised, closest available air support is 2 clicks northwest. Carrying napalm and high explosive. Time on target approximately 20 minutes. Do you copy? Jesus Christ, Loco whispered. Napalm? Cap will never survive that. There has to be another way. There isn't. Harlan keyed the radio. Ranger 6 copies. Target coordinates as follows. He rattled off their position, each number another nail in their coffin. Or their salvation. Maybe both. Targeting data confirmed. The radio operator's voice was professional, detached. He wasn't the one about to die. Be advised, this strike will blanket your entire position. Survival probability is minimal. Understood. Harlan's finger tightened on the transmit button. Execute fire mission. Red hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but his eyes held understanding. Now, the kind that strips away everything but truth. You know what napalm does? Loco's voice cracked. You know how it burns? I know. Harlan did. He'd seen it before. Called it in before. But never on his own position. Never on his own men. Then why? Because Tew won't expect it. Harlan's eyes searched the darkness. He thinks he knows me, thinks he can predict what I'll do, but this... A harsh laugh escaped him. This isn't in his playbook. Deacon stirred, a moment of clarity breaking through the fever. You're going to burn it all down. Everything. Harlan checked his watch. 18 minutes now. The jungle, the VC, us, all of it. You're out of your mind, Loco said, but there was something else in his voice. Respect, maybe, or fear. Maybe. Harlan rose, checking his weapon. But we're about to find out if Tew is crazy enough to die with us. Another flare lit the sky. Closer now. The VC were getting impatient. What do we do? Red finally spoke, his voice hollow. We wait. Harlan's eyes never left the tree line. We watch, and when the fire comes... A smile touched his lips, but it held no warmth. We make sure Tew burns first. 16 minutes. The jungle seemed to hold its breath, as if it knew what was coming, as if it could sense the approaching inferno. Somewhere in the darkness, Tew was watching, planning, believing he had them trapped. He didn't know that Harlan had just turned the entire jungle into a grave. For all of them. The first mortar round screamed through the canopy at 0527. 13 minutes until the airstrike. Incoming! Harlan's warning was swallowed by the explosion as the shell detonated, shredding branches and filling the air with razor-sharp splinters. The VC weren't waiting anymore. Multiple positions, Loco shouted, returning fire at muzzle flashes in the darkness. There... His words cut off in a scream as a round took him in the thigh, spinning him behind a fallen tree. Red was already moving, dragging Loco to better cover. No hesitation, no fear. His eyes were flat and cold as he methodically picked off targets, each shot precise. The boy was gone. War had burned him away. 12 minutes, Harlan called out, checking his watch between bursts of fire. Just hold them. Movement to his left, a VC fighter materialized from the shadows, bayonet leading. Harlan's rifle clicked empty. No time to reload. The fight was brutal, primitive. Harlan caught the bayonet thrust with his rifle, the blade inches from his throat. The VC soldier's eyes were wide with fanatical determination. They grappled in, the mud, each seeking leverage until Harlan's hands found his enemy's throat. He squeezed until something cracked, until the light left those zealots' eyes. Cap! Loco's warning came too late. The second VC fighter's knife opened a line of fire across Harlan's back. He rolled, drawing his own knife, but a burst of gunfire dropped his attacker first. Red stood with his smoking rifle, expression unchanged. 10 minutes, he said flatly. Deacon's fever-racked voice rose above the chaos, quoting scripture with eerie clarity. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death. A new sound cut through the firefight. Commands, being shouted in Vietnamese. The assault was coordinating, focusing. They're coming again. Loco fired one-handed from his position, his other hand pressing a field dressing against his leg wound. Multiple vectors. Harlan saw it now. The VC weren't just attacking. They were hurting them, pushing them into a tighter cluster, making them an easier target for... The second mortar barrage was more accurate. The explosion threw Harlan against a tree, his ears ringing. Through the smoke and confusion, he saw Red returning fire, mechanical and precise. Saw Loco dragging himself to a better position despite his wound. Saw Deacon, pale with fever, but still fighting. 8 minutes, Harlan shouted. They just had to hold. Just had to. A figure emerged from the smoke. Tall, composed, wearing a crisp North Vietnamese officer's uniform. Colonel Tew walked through the chaos like a man taking a morning stroll. Impressive, Captain. Tew's voice carried easily over the gunfire. Calling in an airstrike on your own position? I admit I didn't expect such dedication. Harlan raised his rifle, but a burst of fire from hidden VC positions forced him back into cover. "Unfortunately," Teo continued, "you won't live to see it. I want you alive, Captain. I want you to explain to your commanders why you broke, why you betrayed them. Go to hell." Harlan's words were a growl. "After you, my friend." The final assault came from all sides. VC fighters seemed to materialize from the very earth, pressing closer, determined to take them before the bombs fell. 6 minutes. Loco was down to his pistol, each shot carefully placed despite his injury. Red's rifle ran dry. He drew his knife without hesitation, meeting the rush of VC fighters with cold efficiency. No trace remained of the young soldier who had vomited at his first kill. "Cap." Deacon's hand found Harlan's arm, squeezing weakly. "See you on the other side." 5 minutes, Harlan whispered, more to himself than his men. The jungle was chaos now, a swirling mass of shadows and muzzle flashes and death. Somewhere above, aircraft engines growled closer. The war had come down to this, a patch of mud and blood and desperate men, fighting for the privilege of dying on their own terms. 4 minutes until dawn. 4 minutes until fire rained from heaven. 4 minutes until judgment. 2 minutes. The roar of jet engines split the pre-dawn sky, a sound both terrible and beautiful. Salvation and damnation rolled into one. "Get to the depression!" Harlan shouted over the chaos. "Behind the banyan roots! Now!" Loco grabbed Deacon's arm, dragging him through the mud despite his own wounded leg. Each movement was agony, but he refused to leave his friend behind. Red provided covering fire, his movements mechanical, efficient, dead eyes scanning for targets, through the smoke. 1 minute. The VC pressed harder, desperately trying to overwhelm them before the strike. But something had changed. The hunters had become prey, and the fear in their eyes showed they knew it. Teo stood in the chaos like an island in a storm, barking orders, refusing to retreat. His eyes met Harlan's through the smoke and flame. "Now, Captain," Teo's voice carried over the din. "Let's finish this like men." 30 seconds. Harlan charged. No tactics, no plan. Just primal fury as he crashed into Teo. They went down in a tangle of limbs and blades, rolling in the mud as the sky screamed above them. Teo was strong, his technique perfect. But Harlan wasn't fighting with technique anymore. He fought, like a cornered animal with desperate, savage energy. His knife found Teo's side, drawing first blood. "You're already dead," Teo spat, landing a punch that made Harlan see stars. "You just don't know it yet." 10 seconds. A VC fighter lined, up a shot at Harlan's exposed back. Red's bullet took him through the throat before he could pull the trigger. The kid who had once hesitated to kill now dealt death without blinking. 5 seconds. Teo's hands found Harlan's throat. "Die knowing you failed, Captain. Die knowing." The world turned white. The first napalm canister hit like God's own fury, turning the jungle into an inferno. Trees exploded into steam and flame. The very air caught fire. Harlan and Teo rolled apart as hell rained down around them. The colonel's perfect uniform was burning now, his composed facade cracking as the inferno consumed his forces. "Cap!" Loco's voice barely audible over the roar of destruction. "Move your ass!" 3 more canisters hit, walking their payload of liquid fire across the battlefield. VC soldiers ran screaming as the napalm caught them, turning them into living torches. Harlan scrambled toward his men, toward the relative safety of the depression. A burning branch crashed down, blocking his path. Through the flames he saw Teo rising, drawing his pistol. Red's last bullet caught the colonel in the chest. Teo staggered, disbelief crossing his face as the napalm reached him. His scream was lost in the inferno. The final explosions were deafening. Harlan felt hands pulling him into the hollow beneath the banyan roots as fire consumed everything above. Loco and Red pressed themselves flat, covering Deacon's unconscious form as best they could. "I told you he had a plan," Deacon whispered, a weak smile touching his fever-cracked lips before his eyes closed. The jungle burned, Harlan watched through smoke-stung eyes as the apocalypse he'd called down transformed the battlefield into ash and char. The men who had tried to kill them were burning. The jungle that had tried to swallow them was burning. And something inside, each of them was burning too, turned to ash along with their innocence, their humanity, their souls. They had survived. But as the flames roared, and Harlan held his dying friend, as Red stared with dead eyes at the destruction he'd helped create, as Loco finally stopped trying to smile, they realized survival came with a price none of them had been prepared to pay. The fire consumed everything, even them. The world came back in fragments. Sound first, the crackle of burning wood, the groan of falling trees. Then smell, scorched, earth, melted metal, burning flesh. Finally sight, a hellscape where jungle had been, everything painted in shades of orange and black. Harlan pulled himself from beneath the banyan roots, his lungs burning with every breath. The massive tree had somehow survived the inferno, its ancient roots creating the pocket of survival that had saved them. Or some of them. He didn't know yet. Red? His voice was raw, barely audible. Loco? Deacon? The smoke made it impossible to see more than a few feet. Harlan stumbled forward, tripping over something that might have been a body, might have been several bodies fused together by the napalm. He found Red first, sitting cross-legged among the carnage like a child lost in thought. The kid's eyes were fixed on something in his hands, his combat knife still wet with blood from the final fight. Red. Harlan touched his shoulder. You with me? Red looked up slowly, as if waking from a dream. I killed them, Cap. His voice was distant, hollow. I killed so many of them. Didn't even hesitate, didn't even feel anything. You survived. That's what matters. Is it? Red's laugh held no humor. Look around. Look what we did. What I helped you do. Are we the good guys, Cap? Are we even human anymore? Before Harlan could answer, a shape emerged from the smoke. Loco, limping badly, dragging Deacon's limp form. He's alive. Loco grunted, his face a mask of pain and determination. Barely. But the fever's getting worse. Harlan helped lower Deacon to the ground. The sergeant's skin burned with infection, his breathing shallow. But his lips moved in silent prayer, still clinging to faith even here, even now. Radio's dead, Loco reported, his voice tight with barely contained fury. Command knows we called in the strike, but they don't know if we survived. No extraction coming. No help. He glared at Harlan. This what you planned, Cap? Burning down the whole fucking jungle? I planned for us to survive. But even as Harlan said it, he wondered. Had he become what he'd fought against? A man willing to rain fire on friend and foe alike? They scanned the battlefield together, looking for movement, for threats. Bodies lay everywhere, twisted and charred beyond recognition, but Tyr's corpse wasn't among them. You think he made it? Red asked, finally standing. Nobody could have survived that. But Harlan didn't sound convinced. He'd seen Tyr's eyes in that last moment, seen the inhuman will behind them. Cap. Deacon's voice was barely a whisper. Isaiah 48:10. Behold, I have refined thee, but not with silver. I have chosen thee in the furnace of affliction. Save your strength, Harlan said softly, but Deacon's words hit home. They had been refined in fire, burned down to their essential nature. But what had they become? A sound caught their attention, movement in the burning underbrush, friend or enemy, survivor or threat. Form up, Harlan ordered, but his voice lacked its usual authority. They had survived, but the cost was written in ash and blood and burned souls. The jungle was still burning, and somewhere in the smoke, war waited for them. We can't stay here. Loco's voice was ragged as he worked, on the mangled radio, stripped wires sparking beneath his bloody fingers. They'll come back. They always come back. And we can't move. Harlan gestured to Deacon's unconscious form. The sergeant's breathing had grown more labored, his skin burning with infection. Not until what? Loco's laugh was bitter. Until he dies, until they find us, until the jungle finishes what the napalm started? Red hadn't spoken in hours, but his eyes never stopped scanning the charred tree line. Something had changed in him during the fight. The scared kid was gone, replaced by something harder, something dangerous. I say we move. Loco abandoned the radio in frustration. Firebase Echo is 3 clicks southeast. We can make it if we leave Deacon. Harlan's voice was ice. He's dying anyway. Loco's control finally broke. You made the call to burn everything, Cap. Made the call to sacrifice whatever it took to win. So why stop now? Why? We carry him. Red's voice was flat, emotionless. I'll take point, you two support Deacon. We move slow, we move quiet, but we move together. Harlan studied the young soldier. Yesterday, Red would have looked to him for orders. Now he was giving them. Listen. Loco tried one last time. I respect you, Cap. You got us this far. But maybe it's time to make another hard call. For the first time in his career, Harlan wasn't sure. The weight of command had never felt heavier. Every decision he'd made had led them here, had transformed them into, what? Survivors? Monsters? Both? A distant sound made them all freeze. Movement in the burned undergrowth. Contact? Red's rifle was already up, his finger steady on the trigger. Harlan strained his ears. The sound came again. Deliberate, professional movement. Multiple positions. Charlie? Loco whispered. Maybe. Harlan's mind raced through options, each worse than the last. Or our people looking for survivors. Or two. Red's voice held no emotion. Hunting. The name hung in the smoky air. None of them had been willing to say it until now. No body, Loco muttered. We never found his body. Deacon stirred, his fevered voice barely audible. Through the valley, through the shadow. The sounds were closer now. Voices carried, on the wind, Vietnamese, clipped and urgent. Make the call, Cap. Loco's hand tightened on his weapon. Stay or go. Red was already moving, getting into position to help carry Deacon. His eyes met Harlan's, challenging. No one gets left behind. Isn't that what you taught us? The voices grew closer. Harlan looked at his men. Loco, barely able to walk but still ready to fight. Red, transformed by violence into something unrecognizable. Deacon, burning with fever but refusing to die. His men, his responsibility. We move. The order came naturally, even if the certainty behind it was gone. Together. Red on point, 10-meter spread. I'll take Deacon's left, Loco on right. Move slow, move quiet. And if it's two out there? Loco asked. Then we finish what the napalm started. They rose as one, lifting Deacon with as much care as their battered bodies could manage. The burned jungle pressed in around them, full of shadows and threats, real or imagined. Somewhere ahead, voices waited. Friend or enemy, salvation or death. They had no choice but to find out. They moved into the smoke like ghosts, 4 broken men, trying to find their way out of hell. But hell, they were learning, wasn't a place, it was what war made of men. Darkness fell like a shroud over the burned jungle, and with it came the whispers. Captain Harlan? The voice drifted through the charred trees, too distant to locate, too close to ignore. Did you enjoy our fireworks display? Harlan pressed, himself against a blackened trunk, straining to identify the source. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Your napalm was impressive, the whispers continued. But some fires never go out. Some burns never heal. A scream shattered the night. High, desperate, human. Then silence. Jesus, Loco breathed, still working the radio with trembling hands. That was one of ours. Shut up, Harlan hissed, but the damage was done. Ah, Corporal Ramirez. The voice was closer now, amused. Still trying to call for help? Perhaps you'd like to hear what happened to the last radio operator we found? Another scream, cut off abruptly. Loco's fingers froze on the dials. Static crackled, then suddenly cleared. Firebase echo to any survivors of Ranger 6, respond. This is Ranger 6, Loco whispered urgently. Authentication code. Acknowledged Ranger 6, extraction birds launching, ETA 6 hours. Can you hold? Before Loco could respond, maniacal laughter filled the darkness. 6 hours? You won't last 6 minutes. Red's nerve broke. His rifle blazed into the darkness, the muzzle flash momentarily illuminating twisted shapes in the smoke. When the echoes died, the silence was absolute. Did I hit? Red's voice shook. There was something there. I saw. What did you see, Private Dwyer? The whispers were mocking now. Ghosts? Demons? Or just your own sins coming back to haunt you? Shut up, Red fired again, burning through precious ammunition. Just shut up. Red. Harlan grabbed him. Get it together. They're playing with us, trying to break us. Maybe we're already broken. Deacon's fevered voice made them all jump. Maybe we died in the fire. This is purgatory, our punishment. Sergeant Holloway understands. The darkness seemed to pulse with satisfaction. This is your purgatory, Captain. Your private hell. We're just here to ensure you suffer properly. Harlan felt it happening, his grip on reality starting to slip. The burned jungle seemed to shift and writhe around them, full of half-glimpsed horrors. Every shadow held a threat. Every sound carried death. They're out there, Loco whispered, abandoning the radio. Watching us. Waiting. Let them watch. But Harlan's voice lacked conviction. This wasn't war anymore, this was something older, something primal. The darkness itself seemed alive, hungry. Cap. Red's voice was strange. I can't remember what's real anymore. Did I kill those men? Did I enjoy it? Or did I dream it all? It was real. Harlan tried to sound certain. We're real. This is... Are you sure, Captain? The whispers were inside his head now. Are you sure you didn't die in the fire? Aren't you feeling a little warm? Harlan's skin began to burn. Phantom flames licked at his consciousness. The jungle tilted and spun. Look. Deacon's weak voice cut through the madness. Light. A flashlight beam cut through the smoke ahead. Steady, purposeful, moving closer. The figure emerged from the smoke like a demon from folklore. Colonel Tuo's once pristine uniform was burned and torn, his left side badly scorched from the napalm. But his eyes, those remained unchanged. Cold, calculating, immortal. Captain Harlan. Tuo's English was perfect, cultured. The voice of a man who had studied at Oxford before choosing the jungle. I must admit, I underestimated your capacity for destruction. Harlan said nothing. His hand tightened on his rifle, but he knew it didn't matter. Shadowy figures had materialized in the burned jungle around them, Tuo's surviving forces waiting just beyond the firelight. You destroyed my home. Tuo gestured at the devastation around them. Burned my men. All to avoid capture. Smile touched his lips. I respect that. It's exactly what I would have done. We're nothing alike. But even as Harlan said it, he saw the mirror image. Two men shaped by war into something harder than human. No? Tuo's laugh was genuine. We both sacrifice others to achieve our goals. We both burn everything that stands in our way. The only difference is which side of the line we drew in the sand. Red's finger tightened on his trigger. Harlan raised a hand, stopping him. Don't. Tuo's voice carried a warning. My men will cut you down before your finger closes on the trigger. And I want the captain to hear what I have to say before you all die. Just kill us then. Loco's voice shook, but his eyes held defiance. Stop playing games. Games? Tuo shook his head. This isn't a game, Corporal. This is poetry. This is destiny. Two men, forged in the same fire, meeting where the jungle burns. He locked eyes with Harlan. This is how it was always going to end. End this. The words came from Deacon, his voice suddenly clear despite the fever. End it, Cap. No more running. No more burning. Something shifted in Harlan's mind. Clarity emerged from chaos. You're right. He stepped forward, letting his rifle fall. This ends. Here. Now. His eyes never left Tio's. You and me. One-on-one. No more soldiers dying for our war. Cap. No! Loco tried to move forward, but pain from his wounded leg dropped him to one knee. Stay back. Harlan's command held no room for argument. All of you. Tio studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he removed his pistol and laid it aside. Perhaps we are alike after all. The colonel shrugged off his burned jacket. Very well, Captain. Let's finish this like men. No weapons, no armies, just two killers in the dark. Harlan. Red's voice held something new. Fear. Not for himself, but for his commander. It's okay, kid. Harlan managed a smile. Sometimes, there's only one way out. Yes. Tio's eyes gleamed in the darkness. Through the fire, they stepped toward each other, two shadows among shadows, while their men watched in helpless silence. Around them, the burned jungle seemed to hold its breath. The war had brought them here, shaped them, broken them, rebuilt them. Now it would end them. They met in the ashes of the jungle like ancient gladiators, two men stripped down to their essential nature. No weapons, no tactics, no war, but the one in their hearts. The first exchange was lightning fast. Tio's perfect form against Harlan's, raw power. Fists connected with flesh, blood spraying in the darkness. They broke apart, circled, each taking the measure of the other. You fight like a soldier, Tio spat blood, smiling. I fight like a survivor. He proved it with his next attack, a brutal combination that drove Harlan back. The colonel's technique was flawless, each strike targeting nerve clusters and vital points. But Harlan had learned to fight in alleys and bars before he ever saw jungle. They crashed together again, grappling in the mud. Harlan landed an elbow that would have dropped a normal man. Tio barely seemed to notice. The colonel's burned flesh had deadened his pain response. He was beyond such human concerns now. I studied you, Tio hissed, landing a strike that made Harlan see stars. Learned your patterns, your weaknesses. Another hit, ribs cracking. You think about others, care about your men. That makes you weak. Harlan answered with a headbutt that sent them both staggering. That makes me human. Human. Tio laughed through bloody teeth. Look what you did to my jungle, to my men. You're a monster, just like me. The only difference is, I admit it. They went down in a tangle of limbs rolling through the ashes. Tio's hand emerged from his boot with a knife. He'd lied about no weapons. The blade pressed against Harlan's throat. Now you see? Tio's eyes blazed with triumph. This is why you lose. You believe in rules, honor. I believe in victory. Harlan. Red's rifle came up. Stay back. Harlan gasped as the blade bit deeper. Yes, stay back, Tio mocked. Watch your captain die slowly, knowing he. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Deacon's voice, weak but clear, carried across the battlefield. Tio's head turned instinctively, toward the sound. One moment, one weakness. Harlan's own knife, hidden in his sleeve just as Tio had hidden his, plunged into the colonel's chest. Tio's eyes widened in surprise, then understanding. So, you are a monster after all? No. Harlan pushed him away, letting him fall, but not finishing him. That's why I'm letting you choose how to die. Tio lay in the ashes, blood spreading beneath him. He started to laugh, a wet, horrible sound. Mercy? Now? After everything? Not mercy. Harlan stood, swaying. Choice. More than you gave your victims. Cap. Loco's voice was urgent. Charlie's moving in. We got to go. The sound of helicopter rotors suddenly filled the night sky. Extraction had arrived. Kill me, Teo commanded. Finish it. No. Harlan turned away as Red and Loco pulled him back. Die knowing you were wrong about me. About all of us. They retreated into the darkness as Teo's forces rushed to their commander. The colonel's laughter followed them, turning to wet coughs. That was a mistake, Loco muttered as they ran. Should have finished him. No. Red's voice held new understanding. Cap showed us the difference between surviving and living, between winning and losing yourself. Harlan said nothing. His body ached, his soul burned, but somewhere inside, a small piece of humanity remained. He hadn't lost everything in the jungle after all. The helicopters grew louder overhead. They were getting out, but the war would follow them home. The Hueys came in low and fast, their rotors chopping through smoke and darkness. Twin gunships, their door guns already blazing, announced salvation with the distinctive thud, thud, thud of M60s. Move! Harlan's command was nearly lost in the chaos as the VC opened up with everything they had. Bullets shredded the air around them as they broke cover, making their final push toward extraction. Red moved like a machine, his rifle cracking in precise 3-round bursts. The scared kid who'd entered the jungle was gone. In his place was a soldier who dealt death with mechanical precision. Coming in hot, the lead pilot's voice crackled over their emergency frick. LZ is hot as hell. You got 2 minutes before we bug out. Loco had Deacon over his shoulders in a fireman's carry, his own wounded leg threatening to buckle with each step. But he didn't slow, didn't complain. He just moved, one agonizing step at a time. Covering fire. Harlan emptied his magazine, at the tree line where muzzle flashes betrayed VC positions. His body was one massive bruise from the fight with Teo, but adrenaline kept him moving. The gunship's rockets streaked overhead, lighting up the night as they struck VC positions. But it wasn't enough. Dark figures emerged from the smoke, charging their position with suicidal determination. They're not letting us go, Loco screamed over the firefight. Not after what we did to their colonel. A metallic clink caught Harlan's attention. Grenade landing near Red's position. The kid was too focused on returning fire to notice. No time to think, no time to plan. Harlan moved on pure instinct, tackling Red as the grenade detonated. The blast picked them both up, slammed them back, down. Something hot tore into Harlan's side. Shrapnel or a bullet, he couldn't tell. Cap! Red was pulling him up, the younger man's face streaked with blood and ash. Come on! They were 20 meters from the nearest Huey. It might as well have been 20 miles. VC fire intensified, determined to keep them from reaching salvation. Harlan tried to step forward and his leg gave out. The wound in his side was bad. He could feel blood soaking his shirt, running down his leg. Leave me. The words came automatically, trained into him at command school. Get Deacon out. Shut up. Loco appeared on his other side, still somehow carrying Deacon while helping support Harlan. No one gets left behind. You taught us that, remember? They moved as one, covering each other, pushing through withering fire toward the Huey. Red's rifle ran dry. He switched to pistol without missing a beat. Loco stumbled but refused to fall. Deacon stirred briefly, whispering, "We made it. We made it." 10 meters. The door gunner was screaming at them to hurry, his M60 blazing into the night. 5 meters. A bullet caught Harlan in the side, spinning him. Loco's grip tightened, refusing to let him fall. 2 meters. Red took a round in the shoulder but didn't slow. Then hands were grabbing them, pulling them aboard. The deck was slick with blood, their blood, as the pilot yanked collective. Hold on. The Huey lurched skyward as RPG rounds streaked past. This is gonna get sporty. Harlan's vision was going dark around the edges. The last thing he saw, Was the burned jungle falling away below, still lit by muzzle flashes, still trying to kill them? They had escaped. But as consciousness slipped away, Harlan wondered if anyone really escaped the jungle, or if they just took it with them, burning in their souls forever. The darkness took him. The world came and went in fragments like scenes from a broken film reel. Harlan floated between consciousness and something deeper, darker. Each time he surfaced, reality seemed less real than the memories. "BP's dropping," a medic's voice, urgent but distant. "I need pressure here." Flash, the jungle burning, napalm turning the night into day, men screaming as they burned. "Cap?" Deacon's hand found his, weak but steady. "You're not done yet, Cap. Stay with us." Flash. Martinez disappearing in a spray of red mist, the click of the tripwire still echoing. Status report. The radio crackled with command's demands. "How many survivors?" Loco's laugh was bitter, bordering on hysteria. "Yeah, we survived. But we're not the same men you sent in. You hear me? We're not the same." Flash. Tua's eyes in the darkness. "You're a monster just like me. Blood on steel. Choice. Mercy. Damnation." He's going into shock. More hands on him now, more voices. "Where's that damn plasma?" Flash. Red's first kill. The look in the kid's eyes as something innocent died forever. The mechanical precision of his later shots. Evolution. Devastation. "Padre nuestro que estás en los cielos," Loco was praying. In Spanish now, his usual sarcasm replaced by desperate faith. Flash. The weight of command. Every decision burning like acid in his gut. Every death another stone around his neck, dragging him down into the darkness. "Our Father, who art in heaven." Deacon's voice joined Loco's, English and Spanish weaving together in shared prayer. Red sat silent, staring at his hands. At his rifle. At nothing. His youth had been burned away, replaced by something harder. Something colder. Multiple GSWs, shrapnel damage, internal bleeding. The medic's litany of injuries continued, but Harlan was drifting again. Flash. The jungle. Always the jungle. Green and alive and terrible. Then black and burned and worse. Paradise turned to hell by men like him. By choices like his. "You did what you had to do." Deacon's voice reached. Through the darkness, we all did. But at what cost? Harlan wasn't sure if he spoke aloud or just thought it. The helicopter's vibrations changed, they were landing. Voices became more urgent, movement all around him. "Stay with us, Cap." Loco's voice was fading. "Don't you dare check out now." Flash. Tu's laughter following them through the smoke. "You can leave the jungle, Captain, but it never leaves you." "He's crashing. Get that stretcher ready." Flash. The darkness waited. Not peaceful darkness, not ending darkness. The darkness of the jungle, of choices made and lives taken and souls burned to ash. They had survived. But as Harlan felt consciousness slipping away again, he wondered if survival was really victory, or just another form of defeat. The base medical center's lights blazed overhead, too bright, too clean, too far from the jungle's truth. But the jungle was inside him now, and it would never let go. The whiteness was wrong. That was Harlan's first coherent thought as consciousness returned. The walls of the field hospital were too clean, too sterile, too safe. In the jungle, white meant death. Parachutes that never opened, bones bleached by sun, eyes rolled back in final moments. "You're very lucky, Captain." The nurse's voice was cheerful, professional. American. She checked his IVs with practiced efficiency. "The doctors didn't think you'd make it, but..." "Deacon?" His voice was raw, as if he'd been screaming. Maybe he had. Her smile faltered slightly. "Sergeant Holloway is stable. The infection's severe, but we're doing everything we can." Everything they can. Like the air support that came too late. Like the extraction that almost didn't make it. Like every hollow promise this war had offered. The door opened. Loco limped in, his leg heavily bandaged. Red followed like a shadow, moving with the unconscious precision of a man expecting ambush from every corner. "You look like shit, Cap." Loco's attempt at his old humor fell flat. There was something else in his voice now, anger, simmering just below the surface. "Any word on Deacon?" Red's voice was mechanical, emotionless. His hands kept moving to where his rifle should be, finding nothing. "Stable." Harlan tried to sit up. His body reminded him why that was a bad idea. "What's the damage?" 3 rounds plus shrapnel. Loco dropped into a chair, wincing. "Docs say you'll live, lucky bastard." Lucky, that word again, as if survival was the same as victory. Command's calling it a success. Red's laugh held no humor. Colonel Tew's forces decimated, strategic, objective achieved, mission accomplished. Mission accomplished? Loco's control cracked. They sent us in blind. No backup, no support. Martinez is dead. Wilson and his team, tortured to death. Deacon might never wake up. And for what? So some pencil pusher can check a box? The door opened again. A full bird colonel entered, his uniform crisp and clean. No mud, no blood, no understanding. Captain Harlan. The colonel's smile was genuine but distant. "Outstanding work out there. The brass is very pleased with the outcome. I know it got messy, but..." "Messy?" Red's voice was very soft. "Very dangerous. Tactical engagement with superior enemy forces," the colonel continued, oblivious to the tension. "Successful elimination of high-value target. Exemplary leadership under extreme conditions. There's probably a silver star in this. For you, Captain." Harlan said nothing. His eyes found a spot on the ceiling and stayed there. "Well?" The colonel's smile slipped slightly. "I'll let you rest. We'll need your full report when you're up to it. The details of how you managed to get out." Harlan's voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a knife. "I beg your pardon?" He said, "Get out." Loco stood, his good leg braced. "Sir?" The colonel opened his mouth, closed it, then left. The door clicked shut behind him. Silence filled the room, the kind of silence that came after artillery strikes, after screaming stopped. "You okay, Cap?" Red's question carried more meaning than the words themselves. "No." Harlan kept staring at the ceiling. None of them were okay. None of them would ever be okay again. A nurse appeared in the doorway, her face bright with news that seemed to come from another world entirely. "Captain, Sergeant Holloway, he's awake." But something in her expression said this wasn't entirely good news. Something was different. Something had changed. The jungle had marked them all. Deacon's hospital room was darker than the others. He'd requested it that way, said the light hurt his eyes now. But Harlan knew the truth. After the jungle's darkness, light felt like a lie. They sat in silence for a long time, 2 broken men trying to find words for things that couldn't be spoken. Loco slouched in a corner chair, unusually quiet. Red's absence was like a wound in the room. "I used to believe," Deacon finally said, his voice barely a whisper, "that everything happened for a reason, that God had a plan." His laugh was hollow. "Guess the plan was to show me what a fool I was." "You're not a fool." Harlan's words felt inadequate. "Your faith kept us going, kept us human." "Human?" Deacon's eyes found his. "Was it human to call down fire on our own position? To burn men alive? To leave Tear bleeding out in the ashes?" He shook his head. "Maybe that's what breaks me most. Not that God wasn't listening, but that maybe he was, and he approved." Loco shifted uncomfortably in his chair but said nothing. His anger had turned inward now, eating at him like acid. "Was it worth it, Cap?" Deacon's question hung in the air like smoke. "All of it? The killing, the burning, the changing?" Harlan had no answer. How could he? They'd survived, but survival felt like a curse now. They'd won, but victory tasted like ashes. "Red won't come," Deacon said softly. Won't even look at me when they wheel me past his room. Can't blame him. We're mirrors now, showing each other what we've become. He needs time. Time? Another empty laugh. Time doesn't heal this kind of wound, Cap. Time just teaches you to carry it better. Loco finally spoke, his voice rough. So what now? We just go back? Pretend none of it happened? You can't. Deacon's words were heavy with certainty. The jungle, it's inside us now, growing, spreading, like the infection in my blood. He touched his wounded shoulder. Doctors say they might save the arm. But what about the rest of me? Harlan understood. Physical wounds would heal. But the other damages, to mind, to soul, to whatever spark made them who they were before, those were permanent. I think I'm done, Cap. Deacon's voice cracked slightly. Can't do this anymore. Can't pretend prayers fix what we did, what we became. I know. Harlan reached out, gripped his friend's hand. I know. They sat in silence again, each lost in their own private hell. The machines beeped steadily, counting out heartbeats in a rhythm like distant mortars. What about you? Deacon finally asked. What's next for the great Captain Harlan? The question hit him like a physical blow. What was next? How did you move forward when part of you was still burning in that jungle? I don't know. The admission hurt, but truth was all they had left now. Deacon nodded, understanding. Yeah, that's the real horror, isn't it? Not dying in the jungle, but living after it. Outside, the sun was setting. Shadows crept across the room like memories, like ghosts, like jungle. Dawn broke over Firebase Echo like napalm, orange and violent and beautiful. Harlan sat at his desk, staring at the half-written letter before him. Dear Mrs. Martinez, it began. Then nothing. How could he explain what had happened to her son? How he'd died? What they'd become in those last terrible hours? The letter joined dozens of others in his drawer, all unfinished, all impossible. Loco's re-enlistment papers lay on the corner of his desk, signed and ready. The radio man had dropped them off yesterday, his eyes haunted but determined. Can't go home, Cap, he'd said simply. Not after this, here. At least I know what I am. Red had made the opposite choice. Transfer papers filed as soon as he could hold a pen. Assignment anywhere but Vietnam. The kid who'd arrived 3 months ago dreaming of glory was gone. In his place, a man trying desperately to outrun his memories. They'd sent Deacon home last week. Medical discharge. His arm would heal, eventually. His soul. That was another matter. His last words to Harlan had been from Ecclesiastes. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. An envelope appeared on Harlan's desk, dropped by a nervous private. New orders, new mission. The war, ground on, hungry for more men, more blood, more souls. He stood, joints aching from wounds both old and new, and walked outside. The morning air was thick with humidity and jet fuel, and that peculiar smell that only Vietnam had. Death and growth, and time all mixed together. A Huey thundered overhead, carrying fresh troops to some other part of the endless war. In the distance, the jungle waited, green and alive and terrible, watching, hungry. Movement caught his eye. A new unit arriving, their uniforms still crisp, their eyes still bright with purpose and patriotism. They looked so young. Had Red ever looked that young? Had any of them? One of the new arrivals noticed him staring. Captain Harlan, sir? We heard about what happened out there, in the jungle. They say you're a hero. Harlan said nothing. His hand found the scar on his side, Tuo's parting gift. Sometimes in his dreams, the colonel was still out there laughing, waiting. Maybe he was. The young soldier shifted uncomfortably. Sir, they say you're leading the next reconnaissance mission, that you're the best there is at... Stop. Harlan's voice was quiet, but it cut through the morning air like a blade. You want advice, son? Real advice? The soldier nodded eagerly. The jungle. Harlan's eyes found the tree line. It takes everything, not just your friends, not just your life if you're unlucky. It takes your soul piece by piece, day by day, until there's nothing left but the war. I don't understand, sir. You will. Harlan picked up his rifle. It felt heavier than it used to, or maybe he was just tired. You all will. He checked his weapon with practiced ease. The motion was automatic now, like breathing, like killing, like surviving. The new orders weighed heavy in his pocket. Another mission. Another chance to lose whatever humanity he had left. But where else could he go? What else could he do? The world back home was too bright, too clean, too innocent. He belonged here now, in the shadows, in the smoke, in the endless dance of death that the jungle demanded. He stepped forward into the morning haze. Behind him, the new arrivals watched with confusion and awe. Ahead, the jungle waited. It would always wait, because the war never really ended. It just changed forms, became something that lived inside you, grew with you, died with you. Harlan chambered around. The jungle called, and like always, he answered. Command? Loco dared to hope. Charlie? Red's rifle came up. Neither. Deacon's smile was peaceful despite the fever. Death, coming to collect. The beam grew brighter, resolving into a figure walking with calm purpose through the burning hell. And behind it, other lights began to appear. Many lights, moving closer. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, it would mean a lot.